Hello and welcome to BearlyTactical. I'm Shaun, and today we've got another faction focus. This time it's the High Elves. Again, with a disclaimer, I'm no expert at Total War, Warhammer 2, and I'm not a lore nerd on Warhammer, not yet anyway. So if there is anything I miss out or anything wrong, please do let me know in the comments, and I will happily try and fix it as quick as I can. Now with the High Elves, it is very dependent on which lord you pick, that kind of thing. So this is a general overview. It's quite difficult to do, but hey, we'll give it our best shot. Now, let's crack on. Right, so the first High Elf lord you will encounter is Tyrion. He's got a plus 20 diplomatic relations with High Elves. He's got minus 50% construction time for the Shrine of Cain building. He's got a recruitment duration of minus 1 turn for infantry and cavalry. He has a minus 50% upkeep cost for spearmen, silvering guards, rangers, archers, and silverhelm units in his army, and a recruit rank of plus 3 for Loathen Sea Guard units in his army again. So the early cost reduction is really useful for the spearmen and the archers, because that's going to be your primary spam to begin the campaign. You're not really going to use much else until you get higher tier units. And the the recruit rank for Loathen Sea Guards. Speak properly, Shaun, bloody hell. That's really useful later on in the game. Loathen Sea Guard aren't incredibly viable early on because of the cost, but later they become much more viable as your economy grows. So that's going to be useful. Also, Tyrion is probably the easiest start for the High Elves, so he's a good learning point. I do recommend him if you're looking to learn them yourself. So next in the lineup is Teclus. He is Tyrion's brother, and he comes with a diplomatic relations of plus 10 with men, High Elves, Lizard Men, Wood Elves, and Dwarves, a minus 25% construction cost for mage buildings, recruit rank plus 5 for Lore Masters of Hoeth, mages and archmages, a recruitment cost of minus 25% for sword masters of Hoeth and Phoenix units. He has a wind of power reserve of plus 30, which is a lord effect, and he also has a bound spell, which is fireball, again, just for him. He's an interesting choice. He's in quite a hard place because he doesn't have a lot of land around him. He kind of has potentially some enemies that you could grab some land off of, which is like on the Vampire Coast and some of the Dark Elves as well, potentially, but that's going to be a bit of an upward struggle. The one thing that's really useful with Teclus is this mage reduction cost, because there is a little trick that you can use for boosting your economy later on, which I will cover, and Teclus really enables that pretty damn well. So let's shuffle on. Now we have Alario, the main lady herself and Tyrion's best buddy and girlfriend, I think. Don't know, probably not, but hey. She has an influence cost for the intrigue of court reduction, which is 25%. She gains bonuses when all of Ulthuan is held by High Elves, but also receives penalties when it isn't. She has a hero capacity for handmaidens of plus 2. She gets the evocation of Lilith. I'm sorry, I'm terrible. A right that improves casting and magic item drop chance. The greater evocation of Aisha, one of them. A right which gives a greater benefit to tree units. Alario leaves a lingering bonus on regions she visits, but Alario does grow weaker as chaos grows stronger. She gets missile strength of 15% for Sisters of Avalon and Handmaiden heroes in her army. So the big tip with Alario, is Sisters of Avalon. They are probably one of the strongest ranged units that you will get as High Elves, if not the strongest. And she gets them earlier than anyone else at tier 3. Everyone else has to wait till tier 4. And the fact that the missile strength in her army is buffed even further is really useful. The handmaiden capacity. Man, my brain is a mess today. The hero capacity is really useful because, again, this is something that can boost your economy. We're going to cover that, just like I said with Teclus as well. I will show it off what I mean. So let's roll on. Now for a bit of an odd one, Eltharian. He has a suitable climate of wasteland. Eliminating characters that are marked for death grants you various rewards, which is something that's quite interesting. He has the invocation of Morai Heg. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. A right which summons a unique hero, Hand of the Shadow Crown. A global recruitment duration for all armies of -1 turn. Campaign movement of plus 10% for all armies. In his army, an ambush success chance of 25%. And an upkeep cost of -50% for Shadow Walkers and Shadow Warriors. In his army. So Eltharian, it kind of feels like a bit of a lackluster one, although he does have some interesting units, mainly the Shadow Walkers. I haven't tried the Warriors, but the Shadow Walkers were a lot of fun when I did have a little mess around with them. And the fact that they are so cheap, that's going to become your backbone in your army no matter what, really. And that's pretty much it. He does feel like a bit of an empty character. Like, there could have been a lot more done with him, but it just doesn't feel... He doesn't feel like there's enough depth to him. So, with that, we're going to move on to the two newest boys. Eltharian, one of the newest additions to Total War Warhammer 2. You'll only have access to him if you have the Warden and the Paunch DLC, which adds both Eltharian and Grom the Paunch into the game. Now, he has access to the dungeons of Athel Tamar. I probably said that wrong, and I'm sorry. He can spread the Mists of Yrese, which cloaks Eltharian and his allies' lands in a defensive shroud. He has a -80 diplomatic standing with greenskins, no wonder why. A recruit rank of +3 for spear and ranger units. He's immune to barren wasteland attrition in his army. He has a leadership of +8 for spear and ranger units, again in his army. A melee defense of +8 for spear infantry and ranger units, again in his army. And he causes fear when fighting greenskins, again his army. So Eltharian is pretty much very lord heavy. Most of his buffs come from actually having him in an army. The Dungeon of Athel Tamar is something that is really interesting and really fun to play with. We'll probably cover that in another video where we just focus on an Eltharian campaign and what you should do, what you shouldn't do, that kind of thing. Maybe if you'd like to see it. I don't know. Mistwalker units are going to be a go-to for Eltharian because he does buff them up a bit with his skill tree later on, so that's quite useful. But again, he's going to have pretty much the same tactics as every other High Elf Lord. So, the last chap. Next, Imric. He probably just actually is called Rick. Anyway, probably one of my favourite High Elf Lords, even though I don't actually like High Elves that much because elves. He comes with Dragon Taming, which is seek out the secrets of mighty dragons or defeat them for their allegiance. He has a suitable climate of mountains. He comes with a greater invocation of Vol, which is a right that gives greater buffs to dragon units. He has the invocation of Eldrazi. I probably butchered that. A right that improves and grants experience to dragon princes, lords, and heroes. A recruitment duration of -1 turn for dragons and dragon prince units. A campaign movement of 15% plus. Lord's army, not 50%, geez. Immune to all mountain and desert attrition in Lord's army. Upkeep -25% for dragon and dragon princes in Lord's army. I mean, there's one obvious tip with this. Dragons. He gets lots of dragons. Do you want anything more? Also, if you play his campaign, either kill Eshin quick or run away. Let's move on. So, how the High Elves fight? Well, to be honest, it's quite simple. Ranged is king. You'll be stacking out most of your armies with predominantly ranged units, so like archers and some artillery later on. You'll probably have 4, maybe 5 stacks of spearmen early game, but then they can generally be replaced by stronger hybrid units which have melee and ranged capabilities and do the jobs incredibly well for relatively cheap, depending which lord you've picked and what unit they are. There are dragons and phoenixes and stuff which you can chuck in as well, which are pretty nice. Not really effective until, you know, late game when they're not going to break your economy, unless you're Imric. And of course, then dragons are cheap anyway, so why not? But that's pretty much it. I don't think I really have too much to say on the battle. It's relatively straightforward with High Elves. The campaign is relatively straightforward with them as well. Their allies are pretty obvious. Their enemies are pretty obvious. Most start in very secure positions, with a couple of High Elves starting in a bit more of a tricky area. But even then, they're not entirely surrounded by enemies, so you can get on with it, really. So let's have a look at the finer points of the campaign. So a unique mechanic that the High Elves have is the Intrigue at Court option. This is something that allows you to spend influence to change your diplomatic opinion, well, or someone's diplomatic opinion of you, so you can make them like you more or dislike someone else more. Now you get events that pop up that will allow you to generate influence depending on what you pick, but there is also another option to do it, which is the nobles have a option of secure influence. Now this levels up nicely, and each time it gets an additional one, I think additional 1, 2 and then 3 influence, and you can stack up tons of nobles in one area. And yeah, the rest speaks for itself. You could just repeat the action over and over again, and then you stack up tons of influence throughout the turn. Then what you can use this influence for is basically bombard your allies with loving messages, I suppose, or something, or hateful messages. I don't know, whatever you want to do. And you can get them to confederate with you, or you could get them to go to war with another faction, and you can go in and clean up the mess. So it's quite an interesting little thing. Okay, so we're going to have a quick look at the tech tree. Now, it's a bit odd with the High Elves. It's kind of split up, so you have economy-focused tech, you have cultural-focused tech, so diplomacy and that kind of thing, and then you have your military, and they're all separate. Now, to advance would be the better word. You have to have specific buildings unlocked, and a lot of the time it'll cost you a fair chunk of gold. So advancing through the technology can be pretty slow, which is a little bit frustrating, but it does seem a bit familiar to a few of the other factions throughout the game. So, next little thing. So the economy game with the High Elves is pretty damn strong. They have a weird diplomacy system in that other High Elves would rather have a trade agreement with you than a non-aggression pact, so you start making gold relatively easily. You have a lot of good resources to trade, a lot of good gold-producing buildings as well. And then you have the little trick, which is recruiting a mage or a handmaiden with the ability of entrepreneur, which, well, you can see what it does on the screen. People stack these up in their richest province and just let the money roll in. So that pretty much sums it up. The High Elves are a good faction for learning pretty much the basics of Total War Warhammer 2. If you like ranged armies, they're probably one of the strongest ranged armies in the game. As much as I don't like elves, I don't mind these too much. I'll be honest. I'll take the blow and admit that I don't mind these that much. They're okay. As always, if you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to leave a comment, or catch me on Twitter or Discord or on Twitch, where Twitch we will be doing a Let's Play of the next faction focus. So if you kind of want to get a sneak peek of what's coming up, always try and drop by the Twitch channel. Feel free to leave a like or a subscribe or whatever. It helps massively, as I'm sure you hear from everyone ever. But that's all I can really say. So thank you for hanging out with me and watching this and listening to my ramblings. I will catch you next time, you glorious gits.